Our next presentation is on education standards, assessments, and testing. And it is chaired by Representative Joe Dorman and Representative Donnie Condit, except I think he's not in here anymore. But so I guess it's yours, Representative Dorman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and greatly appreciate you allowing this study. And we did have some modifications. We have some speakers that one couldn't make it and one had to cancel at the last minute. And we do have a person that graciously stepped in to fill in that void. So have Linda Murphy, who will present first.
Well, thank you once again for having the study on education so we can look at the details. I think that's the real issue most of the time. We need to look at these details and take the time to see what it really is that we're doing and which direction we need to go. Common Core State Standards, I was asked to speak about that specifically. And, of course, we have House Bill 3399, which has eliminated Common Core State Standards as a law. And so they're no longer required, and in fact the law gives us the PASS standards from 2010 to work with in the classroom until we have the new standards which are being developed. So just laying that out for anyone that might be listening that doesn't know that. I know these are on audio. The testing is a part of the Common Core State Standards in the situation that we're in. Because nothing happens in a vacuum, we've got state law, we have federal law for testing, as well as the standards that we will be committed to and working with. Common Core State Standards, I was asked to bring forth some of the issues with them that as we develop the new standards, we not resubmit ourselves into a situation that we have now gotten free from. And I really think it's about freedom. It's about local control of education and state control. We have you here, representatives who are elected to represent the people and a voice of the people at the table for policy and for decisions. But with Common Core State Standards, the way that they are written and the way they are developed, they are copyrighted. They are licensed, and the license says that those people who use the Common Core State Standards, any issues that arise have to be resolved in Washington, D.C. courts. That's written into the license. The copyright is to the National Governors Association and to the Chief Council of State School Officers Association, which are nonprofit organizations. They are made up of elected people, of course, governors and state superintendents and commissioners, whatever they're called in each particular state. And in some states, we know in a number of states they're appointed, the commissioners or education heads are appointed by the governor. We're one of about 13 states, last time I checked, that elects the state superintendent. So the power of what is done with the standards under Common Core, if you kept Common Core or if we didn't really get away from it, we are under that control of a copyright, of a license. So we have freedom now, and we are designing our own standards through the state school board, which has elected to appoint a committee to develop a plan and then get into the process of rewriting or writing. We want to look at standards across the nation. I went to a meeting in Boston in 1995 as a representative of Governor Keating's office in education, where the topic was standards. It was a great national effort, and Chester Finn was there with the Fordham Foundation now, but he is one person along with Diane Ravitch and a number of others for years and years have worked on the concept and the effort to have standards, a national set of standards, and at that time the idea was presented that they would not be controlled by anyone. They would be there and each state could meet those standards in their own way. But what we got with Common Core State Standards was the copyright, the license, and really a very rigid system that we only began to implement in the state of Oklahoma as far as all the components are concerned. And as I talk with teachers across the state, I find those who still wish they had Common Core standards or are doing some now, they really have certain things they like about the standards, and I find a lot of them are the younger teachers that maybe didn't have in teacher training some of the depth of learning to work with the students so that they understand what they've read. They don't just read it, but they really understand it and they can apply it. But I'm here to say, and a lot of teachers will tell you the same thing, many of us have used those methods. That's not really a new idea. So looking at Common Core state standards, there are several aspects that I think I should bring out that we want to avoid in our rewrite. The Common Core state standards were developmentally inappropriate on the lower levels of elementary school. And I know you've probably heard this from others, but it's worth repeating because it's a major issue. Developmentally, students can only think cognitively at a certain level of understanding, a certain number of vocabulary words and level of vocabulary. If they don't use words in their everyday life and have understanding of them, when they get that word written in a standard and they have to comply with that, they're just lost in space. And of course the teachers are having to work double hard, triple hard to try to apply that. So we need to look very, very carefully at that type of standard and make sure that we get developmental appropriate standards, developmentally appropriate. On the higher ends, the Common Core state standards also eliminated higher levels of math, so that even Jason Zimba, who served on the Common Core Standards Writing Committee or panel with the organization called Achieve, which was sanctioned to write the standards, Jason Zimba was a math teacher. There weren't many teachers involved, but he said at a meeting in Massachusetts before the state school board that the upper levels of math weren't there and that you wouldn't literally be prepared for college in the higher institutions. You could go into a community college level, and this is where Dr. Milgram at Stanford University has testified all over the country and spoken in a number of legislative meetings in various states that the math standards were not good enough for him to validate, because we hear the word rigor used a lot, and yet when you take a close examination of the standards and find things missing, like higher levels of math, how is that rigor? You know, it's rigorous for a kindergartner to struggle cognitively with something that's more of a third or fourth grade level. That's rigor. Perhaps that's some of the rigor that we hear about. So we have to take a real close look, and these are very easily found and documented. I'll be glad to provide documents on anything that I bring up here today. The literature in the lower elementary grades was eliminated as standard literature that we know, stories and classical stories, that kind of reading that interests students, that gets them motivated to want to read. That was eliminated by about 60%, and 40%, or 60% was that, but 40% was eliminated, and that 40% is instructional, informational text. Now, we do want children to learn to read information, but I will guarantee you, kindergarten, first, second, third grade, we need to be very concerned that there's something in front of them a lot of the time that they want to read, or we're not going to have those high levels of reading remediation and achievement that we need so desperately in some of our schools. That's one of our major problems in some of our inner cities especially. We called it high-interest reading material. There were companies that made a fortune on producing high-interest reading material because you had a third-grade boy that only wanted to read about fishing with his dog and a little girl that wanted to read about a princess outfit that she wanted to wear. So those kinds of stories, you know, plus classic literature, poetry, all of that. In high school, 70% of the literature is eliminated. There was a man who, now there's reading, but it's not the classic literature. There's a man out of Hillsdale College who's produced video and a lot of research into the elimination of that literature. What we're seeing is a switch to a different type of education. From traditional, we are in transition. We're still in transition, aren't we? And if we were to completely implement the Common Core state standards with the testing, with the curriculum aligned, we would be at a transformational place. And we need to look ahead and see, where is that? Where are we going? We don't want to get in a car and just take off without a goal, or a ship, or a plane. We need to know where we're going. And we can look down the road at New York. We can look at Utah. We can look at other states that have more heavily implemented not only the standards, which our teachers have had for several years, but the standards with the required testing that aligns to those standards, and then the curriculum that aligns to all of that, to the standards and testing. Obviously, it's kind of in the middle, so to speak. You're going to test to make sure that they've achieved the standards, but you have to teach what's in the standards and what's going to be on the test, or they're not going to pass it. You're going to have that understanding. A lot of it is about processing instead of facts, knowledge, and information, which is traditional education. Even in math, for example, you see a lot of processing where students, you've probably seen some of the math papers that are out there in the news. They've been out there for a couple of years, and they're pretty crazy processes when a student has to take 20 steps to get the answer to a 3-digit addition problem instead of calculating quickly and writing the answer. In fact, it's wrong. In a lot of the curriculum that is Common Core curriculum, it's wrong if you just write the answer, because you're being taught the process. Now, younger children, developmentally, once again, we need a foundation of reading, writing, math, and loving to learn. We don't want them just to perform, but we want them to love to learn. So in calculation and quick computation, it's a matter of achieving an answer that you can learn and quickly get and use then in everyday life. Go to the grocery store, count the change, add up the grocery list, help mom decide how much is this going to cost before you get to the cash register. Those are practical applications for quick calculation. And if students don't get that foundation, I know that they're handicapped, academically handicapped, when they get to the real world. Out in the real world they are. They might understand a process, but that might be for a later age for a student to understand. But they need those basic, quick calculations: reading, writing, math, subtraction, multiplication. Writing skills have been dropped in a lot of what we're looking at. The cursive writing, that needs to be a part of the process of writing itself. And some states have added legislation that have brought that back in. Now, one thing that people have said, well, you can add to Common Core state standards and make them your own. But 15% is all that were allowed to be added under the law we had. This is why we needed to repeal it. We needed to repeal Common Core law and copyright and license so we could do the things that might work out of it and make our own decisions. Did you have a question?
Yes. Yeah. No, you may ask your question.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess my question is, you said earlier that Common Core standards are licensed, specifically measured, identifiable, copyright identifiable, 15% allowable. Okay, so tell me this. We hear in testimony that ACT and Common Core are directly connected.
Yes.
Then how have they avoided a lawsuit from those owners of the Common Core standards?
That's a good question, but I know that Mercedes Schneider is a teacher in Louisiana who has researched the people that sat on the committees. It was ACT, they were representatives writing the standards. ACT, the College Board, and Achieve. Now, how have they worked that out? I don't know, and we no longer have that because we don't have it in our law. We don't have a copyright now because we removed it from state law.
Follow up.
So you're saying the copyright is merely state law?
Well, we had the copyright for CCSS, Common Core State Standards, was in our state law. It was put into law, and we removed it with 3399.
So
Follow up.
I'm just saying for our state, we're no longer under, that's not law now.
okay, so
For Oklahoma.
therefore there is no copyright law concerning Common Core in the state of Oklahoma. So therefore, if ACT wishes to incorporate it, they're not violating Oklahoma law.
Well, I don't know how to answer that. I mean, that may be true. But the concern about ACT and Common Core is that our law also says we won't have Common Core testing, and ACT has become a Common Core test. They dropped the Plan and Explore, and this is their own announcement. This isn't just someone thinks so. It's in Education Week and other places documented. They dropped Plan and Explore, and they're now doing Aspire. And Aspire is a platform developed by Pearson. So it's actually a joint venture with Pearson and ACT now. That is their system. They're no longer offering
One more question.
Plan and Explore.
So when we hear a school say that they are requiring ACT testing, they're violating the law. Is that not
No,
correct?
they haven't, because it's only now changing. And this is a new law for this year. If we use ACT this year, it will be a Common Core ACT according to their announcements. Now, here's what I hope. A lot of this is about money. Why are we running in circles on some of these things? It's about a lot of money. A lot of corporations sat at the table of decision making when the standards process got to a place of further development. A lot of corporations have donated, have given funding. Bill Gates is one that we hear a lot, and of course, being extremely wealthy, he has a lot of money to put in there. Over $5 billion to education overall is what I have seen documented. So what we see is the companies will go supply and demand. If enough states jump off the track, what I call the control of our standards and our testing, because you get it all hooked up and it's got to go together, so you have to do certain things to make it work. I believe that hopefully some of these companies will back out and offer, again, Plan and Explore work very well for some of our schools. So I have no problem with that, but they say, ACT says they've dropped it, and they will have only Aspire, which is a joint venture with Pearson. Aspire is instead of Plan and Explore.
Representative Kern for a question.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Linda, we were told by a presenter before lunch that the only part of the ACT test that has been aligned with Common Core was first through third grade. Is that not what she said? And that it has not been the high school, secondary. So what are your
Well, I haven't read that. What I've read is that it is Common Core aligned. If they have already decided to back out, it's really may line up with what I just said. The marketplace will determine what these companies do, obviously. They'll provide what they can sell. And if there are enough states that don't want the Common Core test, then we'll see ACT possibly provide that. But I'll check that out. I don't know that
Follow
that's
okay, another question?
true or
Thank you.
untrue.
We've also heard, that David Coleman was the architect of Common Core, and who is over the ACT right now?
He is over the SAT.
The SAT?
David Coleman is over the SAT, which is
okay.
College Board. Uh-huh.
Okay, well, that's,
Yeah.
that's,
And I don't know the
Representative
person at the top
question.
of ACT.
okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Do we have anyone here from the State Regent's office that could clarify some of these ACT questions? I can't see. Could you
Could you come to the mic, please?
and help us sort out some of this stuff, please?
Thank you.
Dr. Cindy Brown.
Thank you, Representative Kitty. Yes, I was. Maybe I won't get in trouble. The state regions have paid for Explore and Plan since '93, and we, in fact, helped ACT develop Explore and Plan. And yes, they are. This is the last year. We talked them into letting us use it one more year. It is a voluntary program for any public or private school in the state. It's interesting what you can get public and private schools to do when you make it voluntary and show them how to use it, and it makes sense. Oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't going to editorialize. But in terms of Aspire, my understanding, and I have asked all the questions that can possibly be asked, I'm sure. Aspire, last week you had ACT person and Skype explain to you how the ACT standards were developed and are developed and refreshed over so many years. They do a nationwide survey of higher ed and common ed, and they put all that into their research department, and they come up with standards. They send those back out. Is this what you need students to know and be able to do to be successful? And they modify that based on all that. It's research-based. ACT has been we were a founding state. We helped them be created in about 55 years ago. We've continued to be a part of that. So is Common Core and ACT the same thing? No. Yes, ACT was at the table. You would expect them to be, right? They believe they are experts at preparing kids for knowing if kids are ready for college. That's an argument in itself. You know, I'm a former elementary teacher, and I taught kindergarten and 4th grade and 5th grade and 7th grade, and I taught the same concepts in many different schools. My husband's Methodist preacher, so we moved around a little bit. And, you know, it didn't matter whether this was the PASS or OBE or the Arkansas standards, because I taught there too, or if it was came out of the Pearson book or the McGraw-Hill book or the whatever. 2 plus 2 was still 4. And somehow that we just seem to get that lost in there. But Aspire, the standards that Aspire are based on, are being developed in the exact same way that the college readiness standards were developed. Nationwide survey, bring it together. They have been pilot tested. They pilot tested in the spring. They're continuing that in the fall. They are now putting all that into their final format. It will be published soon. I texted my colleague at ACT who used to work for me this morning, and she said soon. She's been saying that for a while. So, but is ACT Common Core? No. Is Common Core ACT? No. But 2 and 2 is still 4. And, you know, I just, and as an elementary teacher, I could go get a story that I thought the publisher had left out of my Basel book and bring it in, and we could read it. There wasn't anything against that. And in Lawton, Representative Cootie and I taught those babies, and we knew how to do that. And we still know how to do that. So sometimes things get in the way. I'm sorry, I wasn't going to editorialize.
Thank you. Is there another question? Yes, Representative Kennedy.
I was just needing, I didn't hear the name. I'm sorry.
Dr. Cindy Brown.
Cindy Brown.
From
Thank you.
Regents, State Regents.
Well,
And
I'll
Representative Dorman, this is your study. I saw you raise your hand.
I had a question for Dr. Brown, but it can wait to the end.
All right. All right.
I'll just conclude. I think we need to look very closely because of the Pearson ACT collaboration, which is Aspire. I don't think that we want the Pearson model of testing that we see produced in other states. The curriculum has been very controversial, and that's the type of test item that potentially would be on the test. Now, I also met with ACT representatives when I was in Governor Keating's office. I asked them to do a cross-reference between the ACT and what we had then called learner outcomes. That was following the outcomes-based education, original learner outcomes, back in 91, 92, and our Senate killed those unanimously. It had a lot of affective, how do you feel, appreciation of things that couldn't be measured, that kind of wording. And so they did a crosswalk. I absolutely like the ACT, and if we can be assured of what type of test items we have on it, then that may be separate from Aspire. That's possible. But the Aspire system with Pearson I would look at very, very closely because of the affiliation, not just in a few states, but around the world. They're a global curriculum testing licensing corporation, a large global. One other thing, in 2008, Achieve produced a report where they identified Oklahoma's pass standards as college and career ready, 2008. So all of this falderall about are they college and career ready now seems quite ludicrous when you look at this official report produced by the writers of Common Core State Standards in 2008 saying Oklahoma's pass standards then were college and career ready. So I think a lot of it is about maintaining our freedom, looking closely at the details, and I appreciate a very close study. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Representative Dorman.
Thank you much, Madam Chair. And this could be for both, actually. When we repealed Common Core, of course, we saw the issue develop with losing the No Child Left Behind waiver. The pass standards...
Would you turn on your microphone, please?
Oh, it's on.
Okay, just speak into it. Thank you.
So, as I was saying, the pass standards were certified to not qualify for retaining the No Child Left Behind waiver. So what was the reason for that? Where was the failure on us being able to maintain that waiver?
This is my official capacity, but my understanding is they had not been certified as college and career ready. Now, the 3399 asked the state regents to do that. Their meeting is Thursday, and that final will be announced. And Chancellor Johnson explained last week that process, and it has been arduous, and we have done it very carefully.
Follow up?
Yes.
So will the application be reinstated to try and retain the waiver following that? Was that a possibility?
It is I do not work for the State Department. It is my understanding that that is a possibility, but the state superintendent will have to initiate that.
All right, Representative Casey for a question. Is this for Dr. Brown?
Actually, no, it's not. It's actually for Diane, if she doesn't mind answering the question, because she'd brought up something that I've been told too, and I would just kind of, with your area of expertise, what's your thought? Because I had been told too, especially in the lower elementary, that some of the standards probably were not developmentally appropriate for that age. Misunderstanding for rigor versus, okay, are these children actually ready? What do you see in your district when you was dealing with those standards? And I'm really talking about pre-K, kindergarten first.
Right. What we see in our district is the question I always ask is what is developmentally appropriate? Because if you have a child that is reading at kindergarten, is it developmentally appropriate for that child? I mean, every child's at a different level, so it's very hard to say to me. We don't use that a lot because we try to look at each individual child, and we're there.
Okay, Representative Dorman?
I guess that'll be it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, did you have other presenters?
They had to cancel.
Oh, okay, so this is the end of your
Yes.
report. All right, well, thank you very much. This has been very interesting. We appreciate your bringing this study to us. All right, we're a little ahead of schedule. If our presenters are here, we will go ahead. Is Richard Karam here? All right, then I think what we'll do is I think we'll take a little break here because Richard Karam is going to be our next presenter. And so I think we'll take just about maybe a 10-minute break. Unless there's something somebody wants to say or somebody wants to ask. Maybe there's somebody from the audience who would like to say something. Yes. Yes, Representative Kennedy.
I don't want to keep it from a break, but I'm a bit confused.
All right. Share with us your confusion.
Whether or not our schools that are incorporating PASS and Common Core are violating 3399.
Does someone have the answer to that question?
That's the answer.
You will remain confused.
I'm not a lawyer. That would take a lawyer. But I will just say the conversation that I think makes the most sense about it is what I was talking about earlier. There are certain things in Common Core state standards that all of us as teachers have done. And as long as our teachers have control of that method or that process to make that determination that this would be beneficial in their classroom, I don't see any problem with that. I think the law stopped Common Core state standards as a mandate. They were mandated for all schools. And therefore, all schools had to use Common Core state standards. And they had to use Common Core aligned testing. And now you can't, for the state mandate, require the school to do that because it's not in state law now. I know some superintendents and various administrators and teachers, say, we're doing Common Core, we're going to keep doing what we're doing. Well, I submit that most of them are not going very far into the implementation process to start with because down the road you wouldn't get to control it in the classroom. And all of our teachers basically have been told about Common Core for the last 3 to 4 years before we repealed it that they could choose their own curriculum, they could use their own methods. So if you really look at Common Core closely, there are methods in it. It's written with methods. That's why we have teacher leader evaluation, TLE models, that are Common Core that are still in law right now, and teachers being trained with professional development that is Common Core. And that's a problem, I believe. I wasn't here to talk about that, but that's another part of the big system.
Keep in mind, Representative Kennedy, that from a policy viewpoint, teachers have always been able to go beyond the standards. They've always been able to rise above those to help their students go as high as they can go standard-wise. Common Core was never curriculum.
Okay.
It was standards. Local schools lead in their curriculum.
Okay.
So we're not talking about curriculum at all. But teachers have always had the leeway to go far above standards. I'm sure you have as a teacher. I'm sure everyone in here who's been a teacher has gone above the standards that were required of them and tried to reach for every child, tried to help them reach the standards that they were capable of reaching. Representative Nolan for a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, my question goes back to a clarification in regard to our waiver for No Child Left Behind. I mean, my research before showed that every waiver was different. Every state proposed their requirements for the waiver, and the federal government basically determined whether it was acceptable or not. So I guess that our proposal was to include the adoption of Common Core. Whenever we proposed our waiver to the federal government, they said, okay, we'll do it. They approved it. My question is, and I don't know if anyone here knows this, but I think it's something we should chase, and that is, other states also issued the same type of proposal to the federal government. And what I'd like to know is, did every state put adopting Common Core as part of their waiver in regard to No Child Left Behind? Because unless every state did it, then I don't understand why we wouldn't have some negotiating power in regard to our waiver and how we move forward with the Common Core issue. So does anybody want to address this? I mean, tossing it out there. Does anybody know?
My only thought on this is I believe that our Attorney General, Scott Pruitt, is looking into the loss of the waiver, and that might be something to, talk with his office about, because I think they're delving into just why that was rejected and how much federal control is involved in controlling what we do in the state of Oklahoma through that rejection.
Dr. Hudecki, do you have an answer for that question?
Actually, I don't know which came first, the guidance from the U.S. Department of Education in terms of submitting waivers, whether they use the term college and career ready. I believe that's the case. And so states submitting a waiver application would use college and career ready standards in the lingo or language of their waiver application. So whether or not we would specifically say Common Core, that would depend on the state, but you do have to promise that your standards are college and career ready. So we could not show that at the time that or by their deadline. So that's why they revoked it at that point. Yeah.
All right. In other words, you're saying that we had to show that our new education reforms were going to be college and career ready. Yes. Yes, regardless of what standards we used, they had to be college and career ready. Is that correct? All right, thank you. Are there any other questions? Yes, Representative Dorman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And on that note, as we had the past standards in place, how did they fall so short? If they weren't college and career ready, if they weren't preparing our kids for life beyond school, why did we have those in the first place?
Well, the report from Achieve, which is a nonprofit organization that was sanctioned by the National Governors Association and Council of Chief State School Officers to write the Common Core standards. They were over the process. They produced a report in 2008, an official report. I've got a PDF. You can get one. I'll send you one if you need it, want to look at it. They say in their report that Oklahoma's pass standards in 2008 are college and career ready. Now, did we improve them from 2008 to 2010? I would hope that we did, so that the 2010 are also college and career ready. Let's just talk about the term, college and career ready. It sounds very official. We've heard it a lot. It's in federal documents, it's in law, it's in different places, but isn't that very nebulous, very subjective? What is college and career ready? As I said earlier, Jason Zimba, who wrote math standards on Common Core State Standards Writing Panel, said in Massachusetts, I've seen the video, before the state board in Massachusetts, he acknowledged that the math standards for Common Core would not prepare a student to go into higher education at higher universities. A student could go into a community college level with the math coming out of Common Core. There's a philosophical shift with Common Core. David Coleman, who is considered the architect of Common Core state standards, he was Arnie Duncan's roommate in college. He's not a professor, he's not an educator, but he worked in various entities with education up to the point of coming into the panel writing Common Core state standards for English language arts. And David Coleman says, along with Jason Zimba and others, they talk about leveling the playing field, that Common Core state standards are intentionally bringing all students into a common set of standards which are narrowed but deeper to get everyone through it. And at the end of the process, they will then be on a level playing field because they'll all have the same results. In education, philosophically, we've always said equal opportunity to learn on the beginning end of the process. Equal opportunity to learn is the goal. Don't discriminate. Everyone has unlimited opportunity to achieve to their individual best ability. Individually. Common Core says we will all have equal results. At the end of Common Core, the results will be equal. Now, my friend Rob Miller in Jinx has spoken to this. He has a presentation he's done. A lot of educators who look at it philosophically and listen to the goal of Common Core, it isn't just, here are standards, we've always had standards, here are some more standards, are these good or not? But there's a political view of equalizing the outcomes at the end of the process. That's different. We've never done that.
All right. Keep in mind that we have been told that the regents are going to make a decision on Thursday morning at 9 o'clock, I believe, at the Regents Building. Yes. As to the outcome of that decision, as to whether past standards are college and career ready. We're going to take a brief 5-minute break now before we begin again at 2:30. Thank you.
Thank you.